The twin suns of Virilax hung like molten eyes above the Grand Court of Crowns, streaming gold across spires that clawed at the sky like frozen lightning. Marble stairs wide enough for military parades led into the Great Hall, where banners from 1,000 allied worlds floated without wind. The scent of incense, something sweet and metallic, hovered in the air, meant to soothe the senses and disguise the smell of tension. A hush had fallen over the crowd, the kind of silence that forms only when something truly impossible is happening. Darren Holt stood exactly 3 paces behind the Queen of Ilvara, trying very hard not to hyperventilate. He had only come to deliver a resupply manifest. That was all. 1 sheet, 17 items, mostly replacement fuses and nutritional cubes. Somehow he had been ushered past security, given a silver robe that made him look like an interstellar fondue fork, and told not to speak unless spoken to. He had, in fact, already broken that rule. Twice. The first time by asking a soldier if he could use the bathroom. The second by whispering, "What the hell is going on?" when a 6-armed harpist began playing a tune Darren suspected was written to summon gods older than morality. And now she was standing. The Queen Vel, the one he had seen only once before on a holoscreen, delivering a speech about unifying the spiral arms through diplomacy and occasional orbital intimidation, stood with the grace of a creature who had never stumbled on a rug in her life. Her skin was like pearl under stormlight, and her long ears were shaped like blades of moonlight. She wore armor that looked ceremonial until you noticed the microplasma inlays, pulsing faintly near her shoulders. Her voice, when it came, did not echo. The hall echoed her. "I have made my choice," she said. Every being in the chamber froze. Darren felt the moment like a vertigo drop in a dream. Too sudden to be real, too specific to ignore. "I, Velthire of Ilvara," she continued, turning toward the gathered nobles, "Queen of the Sovereign Realms, Keeper of the Flame Crown, First Star of the Hegemonic Accord." "She has a lot of titles," Darren whispered to no one in particular. "Nirana, declare my intent to take a mate." This caused a ripple in the crowd. Whispers began in dozens of dialects, some of which Darren couldn't parse even with his translator implant. It sounded like a debate between jazz instruments. "And I choose," Vel said, pausing. Her hand lifted, her finger extended. "On this man." Darren followed her finger. It was pointing directly at him. He looked over his shoulder. There was no one behind him. He looked down. Still just his boots. He checked for invisible royalty. Nothing. "Me?" he said, voice breaking into soprano territory. I'm just the tech guy, like for spares and diagnostics." The court remained silent. He tried again. "I have no noble blood, no military record, and the last thing I ruled was a game of space trivia, which I lost." Still silence. Vel turned her gaze on him, measured, amused, something almost fond hiding behind the gleam in her alien eyes. "I know." Darren blinked. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. His internal monologue was now just screaming. Somewhere in the back of the court someone fainted. A member of the High Consular Guild, possibly. A robot scurried over to revive them, tripping over its own legs and launching a tray of refreshments into the lap of the Varnathi ambassador, who began to hiss like an offended snake dolphin. Vel descended the dais, every movement deliberate. Her armored boots clicked like punctuation marks against the polished stone. When she stopped before Darren, he realized she was even taller up close. He tried to straighten his posture, which mostly resulted in him looking like a malfunctioning antenna. "You do not wish to be chosen?" she asked, one brow arching high and sharp. "I mean," Darren said, "usually the things that choose me are vending machines, and they mostly reject my card." She smiled. It wasn't the smile of a queen asserting dominance or a leader placating a court. It was something else. Amusement, genuine amusement. "You repaired a vital food synthesizer on an asteroid base under attack," she said. "I mean, yeah, but I used a spoon and duct tape. It wasn't exactly heroic." "You held your ground when the base's governor abandoned his post." Mostly because I couldn't find the emergency escape pods." "You stayed until the civilians were safe. There was only one shuttle left, and I figured they needed it more than I did. Also, I'm pretty sure I voided my insurance coverage by trying to climb out the airlock." The queen nodded as if he had confirmed a thesis she'd been writing in her head. Then my choice is made. The court exploded into noise. Arguments in 12 languages rose like a chorus of chaos. Somewhere in the din, a Kryvax noble challenged someone to a duel. Someone else began live streaming. Darren just stood there utterly frozen, caught between, "This must be a prank," and, "Do I have to bow now?" Vel raised one hand, and silence returned. "From this day forward," she said, "this man shall be recognized as my chosen mate. Accord willing, he shall stand beside me in future matters of rule." Darren held up a finger. "Just to clarify," he said, "does that include planetary invasions, or is that more of a ceremonial?" She turned back to him. "You may continue being yourself," she said. "That's probably the most terrifying permission I've ever been given." He glanced around. Dozens of powerful people were staring daggers at him, some literal, some metaphorical. At least two had their hands near plasma blades. A Vorn diplomat was weeping quietly into his translator fish. "Do I get a raise?" Darren muttered. Vel leaned in slightly. "What you get," she said softly, "is time. To understand. To ask questions. To refuse if you must." Darren swallowed. "Do people usually refuse you?" "Not twice." Her tone was dry, almost playful. The tension in Darren's chest loosened by a hair. "Okay," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Okay, this is fine. I can deal with this. Just another day. Just got promoted to, interstellar consort or something. Totally normal." Then under his breath, "Why couldn't it have been an accounting job?" Vel's smile widened, and though the court stood in a storm of scandal and disbelief, she simply took Darren by the elbow, gently, and led him away from the podium, past stunned generals and gasping aristocrats, through the vast silver doors of the royal chamber. "I have questions," he said. "I expect nothing less," she replied, and the doors closed behind them. The royal chambers of the Ilvaran palace were less a suite and more a miniature ecosystem. Trees with bioluminescent petals arched from open walls, shedding light like stardust. The floor hummed beneath Darren's boots, attuned to his heartbeat, or possibly just trying to scan for parasites. He had no idea. At least the furniture looked vaguely sittable. Vel gestured to a divan made from the woven hair of cloud beasts or something equally absurd. Darren sat carefully, half expecting it to react. It didn't. Small victories. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked, gliding to a curved console. "Sure, do you have water?" She glanced at him. "From which planet?" "Earth?" "Tap if you got it. Or, bottle's fine too." She pressed a button. A spherical drone descended from the ceiling, rotated to face Darren, and projected a holographic menu featuring 600 varieties of water. One included glowing particles, and the advisory may induce minor prophecy. "Option 6 looks fun," Darren said, "but I think I'll stick with Earth Tap." The drone chirped, zipped away, and returned with a floating glass orb of cloudy water. Darren took it, tried sipping, then discovered it didn't pour. He accidentally poked it. It popped and soaked his front. Vel made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. "I'm very regal," Darren muttered, blotting his shirt with the sleeve of his robe. "Shall I fall down some stairs next?" "You're adapting faster than expected." "Oh, sure. I've almost got the hang of water." She settled into a seat across from him, armor folding away into a silkier garment as she moved. Technology layered into fabric, Darren guessed. She leaned forward slightly, her long ears twitching once, as if catching a frequency he couldn't hear. "I meant what I said," she told him. "You may refuse." "Right, sure." Darren scratched the back of his neck. "And if I did, what happens? Do I get reassigned? Mind wiped? Shot out an airlock?" "I would be disappointed. But no, you would return to your duties. Unharmed, mostly." "Mostly?" "Palace protocol requires that you eat one ceremonial pepper of courage before departure." "Is that a metaphor?" It's quite literal." There was a pause. Darren nodded slowly. "Then I guess I'll think about it." Vel tilted her head. "You're not afraid of me." "Statistically, I should be," he replied. "But I've had worse bosses. At least you haven't screamed at me over a misfiled coolant requisition." "Not yet." Darren almost smiled. "So, what's the catch?" Vel blinked. "Catch?" You're, well, you. You could have any noble, war hero, or alien demigod with extra limbs and a jawline sharp enough to deflect lasers. And you pick a guy who once glued his hand to a docking hatch. You intrigue me. I'm basically an accident in slow motion. That may be exactly what this galaxy needs. Before he could argue with that, the door whooshed open and a being floated in. An advisor, judging by the nervous twitches and clipboard analogs strapped to one limb. It resembled a jellyfish wearing spectacles. "Apologies, Your Radiance," it pulsed, voice translated through a hovering orb. "A situation." Vel sighed. "Let me guess. Assassination attempt." "It would appear so." Darren raised his hand. "I didn't do it." "No one thinks you did," Vel said. "Okay, but it's good to have that on the record." The advisor rotated in midair. A delivery drone was intercepted en route to the throne's morning chamber. It contained 3 sachets of high-density neuroacid. Also a note. Vel's voice went ice flat. "Read it." The advisor cleared its throat, or maybe simulated one. "Long live the throne, but not the throne sitter. Long live tradition, not contamination." Darren winced. "Wow. Someone's been using a thesaurus for evil." Vel stood, expression unreadable. "Who intercepted the drone?" "A human, civilian tech, assigned to maintenance." Darren blinked. "Wait, what? Me?" "Not you," Vel said. The advisor floated closer. "Ensign Cal Davies, your co-worker, the one with the nose ring and alarming caffeine intake." "Cal stopped the drone?" "With a chair," said the advisor. "He broke 3 fingers. He is recovering in the infirmary. We've offered him an honorary knighthood. He requested a lifetime coffee stipend instead." Darren exhaled. "That tracks." Vel was silent for a long moment. Then she turned back to him. "You and your kind," she said, "persist despite irrelevance. You survive not through power or strategy, but sheer will, and sometimes chairs. That sounds about right. You're underestimated. That makes you dangerous. I'm dangerous in the way salad is dangerous if you forget your fork. You're more than you know, Darren Holt. That is a very generous interpretation of my resume." The advisor made a polite hum. "Shall I inform the court you will be attending tonight's convocation of unity together?" Vel's eyes never left Darren. "Yes." Darren opened his mouth, closed it, thought about protocol, thought about ceremonial peppers. "Do I have to wear the robe again?" "Only if you want to be mistaken for a dessert." "I really don't." "Then no." He nodded. "Okay, I'll come. But I'm bringing my own water." Vel smiled again. This time it wasn't sharp or mysterious. Just warm. And for a moment, despite the threat of neuroacid, assassins, and a galaxy full of skeptical aliens, Darren felt less like a man out of place and more like someone exactly where he was supposed to be. The Convocation of Unity was held in the Sky Vault Hall, a structure so high above the palace it technically orbited it. Suspended on invisible gravlocks, the dome rotated slowly to give all attendees a shifting panoramic view of the Elvaran capital, the twin suns glinting off towers and skyships like sequins on a planetary ball gown. Darren's first thought when stepping inside was that someone had turned a planetarium into a diplomatic rave. His second thought was, "I'm going to fall off something and die in front of the entire interstellar aristocracy." The floor was transparent, not faux transparent, actually see-through, like standing on nothing. Below, thousands of meters of airspace shimmered. Then far below that, streets and towers and the occasional drifting transport. Darren wobbled immediately. "Gravity mesh will catch you if you fall," said Vel, not looking back as she walked across the invisible platform with the confidence of someone who routinely defied physics. "I'm not worried about falling," Darren replied, one foot hesitating in midair. "I'm worried about flailing in a dignified way." She stopped, turned, and offered her hand. "Then flail with purpose. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." With exaggerated caution and very real muttering, he stepped forward. The mesh held. The illusion of falling through the sky did not improve. A 3-eyed delegate from the Aldrex Commonwealth floated past, nodding politely, wearing a cloak made of something that looked suspiciously like condensed fog. Darren tried not to stare. or scream. The central dais was shaped like a blooming star, with petal-like platforms extending toward each faction's delegation. Vel and Darren took their position at the Ilvaran point, where a regal-looking chair of living crystal stood beside a far less impressive stool labeled Consort Temp. Darren eyed it. That seems temporary. It's a test, Vel said. Of what? Your sense of humor. Oh, good. I'd be worried if this were political. As they sat, an orb the size of a melon descended from the ceiling, projecting a six-sided hologram in the air above. Delegates from over 30 allied species blinked into view, many in person, some by holofeed. The room buzzed with static energy and polite hostility. The presiding moderator, a gelatinous creature wearing ceremonial spectacles, drifted to the center and rang a gong by extending a limb that resembled a rolled-up yoga mat. Order, order, it burbled. We convene the 87th Convocation of Unity. Let our oaths be renewed and our agendas debated. Please do not throw food this time. A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the assembly. One delegate from the sector of Vorn sheepishly lowered a hand that had been creeping toward a suspiciously weaponized fruit bowl. Let us begin with ceremonial reports, the moderator intoned. First, the Queen of Ilvara, who has announced a consort. Heads turned, eyes narrowed, feathers ruffled. Darren attempted to smile. Vel stood, regal and calm. Yes, I have chosen. Have you also lost your mind? Hissed someone from the Krivax table. Darren raised a finger. Hi, just want to clarify I'm not contagious, or political, or especially threatening unless cornered with a wrench. You insult tradition, said another. I insult bad plumbing more often, to be fair, Darren replied. Vel remained composed. The galaxy changes. We evolve or we perish. You may see a technician. I see someone who chose the lives of strangers over his own, without fanfare or reward. A few murmurs softened. One delegate leaned in to whisper to another. Darren imagined it was something like, he doesn't even have medals, or is that robe from a discount moon bazaar? Vel continued, he does not lead fleets. He does not seek power. And precisely because of that, I trust him. Darren swallowed hard. Wow, no pressure or anything. The holographic image above them flickered, briefly, then snapped back into clarity. A glitch, or a probe scan. Darren looked up. Vel's eyes narrowed. Someone, somewhere, was watching too closely. They continued with the ceremony. Reports from outer sectors, disputes over mining rights near the Gesh Nebula, a heated debate about the ethics of weaponized opera drones. Darren tried to follow. He really did. But the chair had no back, and the language of politics was mostly just passive-aggressive poetry. Halfway through, he leaned toward Vel. Hey, can I ask something? You already are. Are those fog cloaks actually functional, or just for drama? She didn't miss a beat. Both. They generate disorientation fields, also very moisturizing. That's fantastic. I want one. I'll consider it if you survive tonight. Darren blinked. Should that be in question? She smiled without smiling. Always. They returned to the palace by glidecraft, a silent silver vessel that surfed air currents with the grace of a whale dreaming of ballet. As they disembarked, two palace guards stepped forward. Security breach, one said. Minor, handled. Darren raised a brow. Define minor. A small drone infiltrated the hall's outer ring, was intercepted. Surveillance data corrupted. Define handled. The guard's silence said enough. Later in the Queen's private observatory, Vel poured something warm and slightly luminescent into 2 cups. Darren accepted his and sniffed it. Does this drink also cause prophecy? Number, but it might reveal your favorite memory if you're not careful. I'll stick to small sips. He paused, watching stars wheel slowly beyond the glass. I've been thinking, he said. Back there, you didn't just defend me. You challenged them. All of them. I'm used to it. Yeah, but why keep doing it? For me? Vel leaned back. Because they see weakness where I see strength. Because I'm tired of pretending proximity to power makes someone worthy of it. Because I have watched generals lead fleets into ruins and call it glory, and I have watched a maintenance tech use duct tape to save 87 lives. He stared at her, stunned. And, she added, because I find your jokes refreshingly awful. He grinned. I try. Try less. He sipped the drink again, carefully this time. Something like cinnamon and static danced on his tongue. Outside, a faint flicker crossed the sky. Another probe, or a signal. Something or someone was not amused. Vel stood, long ears twitching faintly. I need to prepare. For what? The next phase? Darren stood too. Will I like this phase? Almost certainly not, he sighed. All right, but if it involves formal wear again, I'm drawing the line at sequins. Her laughter echoed across the observatory, a sound Darren was slowly beginning to think of as home. Darren was not expecting a duel. He had expected, perhaps, another uncomfortable dinner with utensils that made him feel like he was playing a game of interstellar cutlery charades, or another diplomatic function where he would once again be mistaken for a decorative assistant, a new kind of space pet, or, his personal favorite, a humanoid good luck charm. But a duel, with swords? Plasma-edged, heat-tempered, ceremonial swords, no less. You could have warned me, he hissed to Vel, as they stood at the edge of the grand reflection garden, which tonight looked more like the set of a very stylish intergalactic action film. I thought it would be fun to surprise you, she said calmly, handing him a polished blade that immediately emitted a polite humming noise, as if it were judging him. This is not a fun surprise. This is a surprise that ends with me bleeding from somewhere important. You won't have to fight, Vel assured him. Not unless things go poorly. Your definition of poorly worries me deeply. Across the crystalline walkway, Lord Cyrex of House Toravox dismounted from a hover chariot shaped like a basilisk in mid-snarl. He wore traditional dual garb, midnight black armor laced with ceremonial venom sacs, which Darren was about 80% sure were real. I challenge the Queen's consort, Cyrex declared, to defend her honor and the sanctity of the Ilveran bloodline. Whoa now, Darren called out. First of all, I am deeply unqualified. Second, I bruise emotionally and physically. And third, your armor looks like it was designed by a very angry museum. Vel stepped forward before Cyrex could respond. If you have grievance, Lord Cyrex, address it to me. Or is your courage too selective? Tradition grants the right to challenge, Cyrex snapped. And logic grants the right to laugh, Darren muttered. The attending court was tense. High-born figures from a dozen worlds watched, masked or glittering or both. The duel was formal, sanctioned by ancient law, one of those dusty rules no one had used in centuries, but that could still ruin someone's week. I'm going to get flambéed, Darren whispered. You won't, Vel said, because you're not going to fight. Well, that's good. Wait, what? Vel stepped onto the dueling platform. By the same code, I can stand in defense of my consort, which I do. Cyrex looked outraged. This is not a matter for queens. Oh, I agree, Vel interrupted, drawing her sword. It is a matter for queens who are tired of arrogant men pretending tradition gives them license to challenge what they can't comprehend. The blades ignited. Plasma shimmered like fire, suspended in liquid crystal. Darren backed up so quickly he almost fell into a koi pond containing, according to a plaque, aggressively telepathic fish. The duel began with a blur. Vel moved like a thought, too fast to follow, too precise to predict. Cyrex struck like a charging rhino with an ego problem. Sparks flew. The sound of metal clashing with energy echoed through the gardens, unsettling the flora. One tree folded its petals in protest. Darren watched, half mesmerized, half horrified. She's actually enjoying this. A nearby attendant, who looked like a beetle with a monocle, nodded. She hasn't had a good duel in decades. I'm glad someone's having a good time, Darren mumbled. Cyrex growled and struck hard. Vel dodged, spun, disarmed him in one movement, and flicked the blade from his hand. It landed at Darren's feet. He looked down, then up. Nope, he said, stepping back. Not touching that. Vel held Cyrex at sword point. Yield, she said. He bared his teeth. I will not acknowledge a consort who... Before he could finish, Darren called out, Hey, just for the record, I'm very comfortable not being acknowledged. I have a long history of being ignored in group settings, so we're all winners here. Vel didn't lower her sword. Yield. Cyrex finally dropped to one knee, seething. Vel turned and walked back toward Darren, plasma blade still glowing faintly. That was invigorating. You say invigorating, Darren said. I say terrifying with good lighting. You're still standing. Thanks to not being anywhere near the action. That's strategic wisdom. I call it survival instinct. They left the garden to muted applause and not so muted muttering. Back inside the palace, Darren was escorted to the Queen's private dining chamber, where a spread of galactic delicacies awaited, guarded by two sentinel robots and something that might have once been a plant before it learned politics. I think Cyrex actually wanted to duel me, Darren said between bites of something purple and pleasantly spicy. He wanted to make a statement, and he did. One of failure. Well, I made a statement too. It was mostly squeaking and backing away, but still, Vel raised a glass, to squeaking with purpose. They clinked. Later that night, Darren sat alone in a side lounge trying to parse the events of the evening while sipping something that tasted like roasted lightning. The stars outside the palace shifted slowly, constellations rearranging above a world still spinning despite everything. Grint, the sarcastic palace plant, rustled beside him from its pot. So, almost died again? Yup. You're doing well. I'm not dead. That's my main metric. Would you like a prediction? I'd prefer a day off. I predict neither. Vel joined him moments later. No armor, no blade. Just herself. You handled it well, she said. I watched someone almost get filleted. And you didn't panic. I panicked very efficiently. She leaned beside him. You are somehow becoming necessary. Darren blinked. That's either a compliment or an ominous prophecy. Both. He looked at her. For once, he didn't feel small. Vel? Yes? Next time, can I just challenge someone to a game of interstellar checkers instead? Only if it's to the death. He smiled. She did too. Outside, unseen and distant, a shadow moved through the edge of the system, absorbing transmissions and watching patterns. The Queen had chosen. The galaxy was listening. And somewhere in the dark between stars, a silent reply prepared to arrive. Darren had never attended a galactic coronation before, let alone one that included a live neutron harp, a fleet-wide broadcast, and a menu containing something called quantum pudding with a disclaimer. May exist in multiple states until consumed. He tried it anyway. It was surprisingly tart. The Hall of Celestial Accord was packed with every variety of sentient life the spiral arms could spare. Nobles in gold-veined armor, scholars with metallic eyes, jelly-based diplomats sloshing gently in containment spheres. Above them hovered holographic windows broadcasting the event live to millions of viewers who likely had no idea why a former maintenance technician from Earth was now sitting next to the Queen of Elvara, wearing formal robes tailored to make him look slightly less like a confused sandwich. I still feel like someone's going to shout imposter and throw me off a balcony, Darren whispered. Vel adjusted her ceremonial headpiece, which shimmered like condensed nebulae, and could probably redirect missiles if angled right. If they try, I'll throw them off a balcony. You say that like it's comforting. It should be. A minor noble approached, six-legged, nervous, holding a trembling tray of ceremonial offerings. Your Radiance and Companion Holt, it's time for the declaration. Darren blinked. I have to say something? Just a few words, Vel said, rising. Something true. Can I just wave and smile? You could, she said, walking toward the dais. But this galaxy has heard enough silence. Say something that echoes. The hall dimmed as spotlights narrowed. Vel stepped onto the central platform, lifting her hand. The crowd fell still. She spoke of unity, strength, change, not as slogans but as choices. Her voice rang with clarity, passion, and steel. Then it was Darren's turn. He shuffled up beside her, aware of every eye watching. Somewhere in the crowd, Cal, the technician who once saved the Queen with a chair, gave him a thumbs up and mouthed, "Don't die." Darren cleared his throat. I didn't expect any of this," he began. "I didn't plan to be here. My biggest ambition used to be getting the cargo inventory to line up with the shipping logs." A few chuckles. Encouraging. "But then I met someone who didn't care about rank or reputation, who saw worth in me when I couldn't even find it myself. And more terrifyingly, who expected me to live up to it. He paused. The air felt heavier, charged. This galaxy has enough people pretending to be more than they are. I figure it could use one or two who are okay just being real. The room held its breath. Then applause. First scattered, then swelling. Waves of sound from voices mechanical, organic, musical. Darren stepped back, not quite smiling, but not panicking either. Growth. As the coronation continued, another presence watched, not from within the hall, but from orbit. An ancient data construct embedded in the core of a long-dead war satellite had activated days earlier. It had been dormant for centuries, a relic from a time when the idea of a queen loving a human was as probable as neutrinos forming a jazz band. But it had protocols, triggers, and the queen's declaration, broadcast to the stars, had pinged every alarm. Ilvaran deviation detected, it whispered. Response, cleanse. It powered weapons, adjusted trajectory, aimed, and then it exploded. Did you do that? Darren asked hours later, watching the report scroll across a holoscreen in Vel's private chamber. I did not, she replied, pouring tea. Well, someone blew it up. Pretty conveniently. Vel didn't look up. Cal may have borrowed a few graviton missiles and rigged a satellite to mimic the broadcast frequency. He did what? He said it was for practice. Darren blinked. I have got to get that guy a raise. You already did. He now runs strategic contingency operations. Of course he does. Vel sat beside him. So, are you ready for the next step? I thought that was the next step. She tilted her head. There's always another. But this time, we take it together. Darren looked at her. Really looked. At the queen who had once chosen him not out of desperation or politics, but out of stubborn, startling belief. And he thought about the path that brought him here. A cargo manifest, a malfunctioning synthesizer, a choice to stay when running was easier. He took her hand. Together sounds good. Later, alone on the terrace under the slow-turning stars, Darren stood watching the lights of the city blink below. He no longer felt like a visitor in someone else's story. The robe fit better now. So did the title. Behind him, Grint rustled. So, saved by duct tape, crowned by accident, survived assassination, gave a speech, and didn't fall off anything. Darren grinned. Yet, you've changed. Yeah, he said, glancing up at the twin moons. I have. And far across the stars, messages pinged from one system to the next. Reports of a queen who had chosen love over legacy. Of a human who became something more by never pretending to be more than he was. Of a galaxy, long fractured, beginning to shift, not because of power, but because of persistence. The story of the queen and her consort became legend. And it began always with one quiet, stunned man whispering, "Me?